So my presentation is on my research paper, which is going to examine the relationship and the effects and causes of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the impacts that it has upon democracy. So it's going to examine specifically, it's going to look at free trade and specifically the Trans-Pacific Partnership, looking at it through the theoretical framework of transparency. So transparency can be defined as the free passage of information between government institutions and its people. It can also be seen as the openness and ease with which the people in a democratic country are able to access and make decisions based upon information provided to them by a government. So the greater transparency there is in a democracy, this will make it easier for citizens to access the relevant information they need in order to be able to make educated decisions. By being able to be better informed, the citizens are then able to make better decisions in regards to who they elect based on their policies. The paper is going to analyse the effects of the Trans-Pacific Partnership on democracy through this lens. So one question that the paper is going to seek to answer is, does the Trans-Pacific Partnership have the potential to make a democracy less or more transparent? So whether the answer is yes or no, it will then seek to analyse the impact that this will have on democracy. The paper is going to define democracy as a Western liberal democracy which holds free elections. It's specifically going to take this very narrow view of democracy, which is given in one of the readings by Dahl. This view of democracy incorporates not just elections but also the free flow of information. So by taking this view of democracy, it will allow for a broad analysis of the impacts that free trade and specifically the Trans-Pacific Partnership have on democracy through the lens of transparency. So it will only analyse the impact upon those states which meet this requirement. That means that because the Trans-Pacific Partnership is made up of 12 nations, not all of them are free Western liberal democracies, so it's only going to analyse the impact upon those nations which are free liberal democracies found in the West, and mainly the United States, New Zealand, Australia. So despite holding to a narrow view of democracy, it will also examine the free passage of information as a key component of democracies and their decision making. So this analysis will look wider than just elections, free and fair elections, and the impact that it has upon them, but it will also have a look upon other elements that make up what is included in democracy. As I said, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is covering 12 nations, but it's only going to examine Australia, the USA and New Zealand. So free trade has become a cornerstone of a much more globalised world. The main elements which make up what would be described as free trade are tariff reduction, quality control measures and barriers for quantity. So tariff reduction reduces the taxes imposed by a nation on another nation's goods. This prevents them from being competitive, so by reducing those tariffs they are able to be more competitive in the other nation, and therefore a country is more likely to purchase that other nation's products. Quality control measures are fairly self-explanatory in that they are made up of measures imposed by one government upon another corporation or another nation's products, as they must meet a high control standard, a high quality standard, in order to be allowed to be traded in that country. So a nation like Australia, which may have very high quality standards, may not trade with another nation, perhaps a poorer nation with lesser quality standards, as it wants to maintain, as Australia wants to maintain the standard on all its products. And barriers for quantity are also used in order to restrict trade. Obviously, that just reduces the number of a product that one nation or one corporation is able to bring into another nation. So by removing those barriers, or by reducing those barriers, nations open themselves up to freer trade and more competitive trade, and therefore more trade is likely to happen in the globalised world. These three measures are used widely within the Trans-Pacific Partnership and are also used as basic measures for free trade. As I said, the Trans-Pacific Partnership uses all three of these control measures in order to increase trade between the nations. So it tries to make it easier, tries to make trade easier between the nations and corporations within those who sign up to it. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is extremely complex and covers a wide variety of industries, and that includes manufacturing and agriculture to pharmaceuticals and other industries. So one of the major issues with the Trans-Pacific Partnership is its complexity. It covers such a broad range of areas and is an agreement within 12 nations, so naturally it's going to be extremely complex. This means that one of the impacts that this will have on transparency is that it is very easy for politicians to hide behind its complexity and reduce transparency within that nation. By reducing transparency, it reduces the way in which the public can engage with the policy. So this is bad for democracy because there is a less informed public, and that allows and opens up the possibility of populist policies and leaders to make use of that confusion. So this is particularly seen perhaps with the rise of Donald Trump, and also perhaps with Brexit, where leaders and groups within the nation are able to use the ignorance that is perhaps tried to be exploited by their opponents, and they exploit this by pandering to the fears and the doubts that often are had, and therefore are able to exploit that lack of transparency for their own gain. This is obviously bad for democracy because it reduces competition and relies on people's fears and doubts, and therefore they tend to vote in their own nationalistic personal interests. It's also possible that politicians try to exploit the way that there is a lack of transparency for their own political gain. Often it is easier for politicians to not explain policies that perhaps are very broad and complex, in the fears that their own citizens will not like it and therefore not elect them. Therefore they tend to avoid large debate and large discussion on these sorts of complex issues. This obviously reduces transparency and is exceptionally bad for democracy. These are just some of the issues that are found with the lack of transparency because of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a very complex document and a very complex free trade agreement. The paper is going to continue to analyse other issues that are brought up and the way that this impacts upon democracy in a nation.